Marcus Ellison. My name is Marcus Ellison. I'm 42 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that being a good man meant being steady, patient, and quiet about your pain. I worked as an engineer by trade, but in my heart I was always more of a builder of homes, of trust, of a future. I wasn't the type to raise my voice or air dirty laundry. I believe that if you loved someone enough and showed up every day, that was enough. But nothing prepares you for the moment when the person you built your life with uses your silence as a weapon. And in my case, that moment happened in a courtroom with a judge staring down at me and my ex-wife sitting across the aisle, calling me mentally unstable. Elena, my ex, wasn't always like that. She used to be warm, funny, even soulful in the way she saw the world. But after our son was born, things shifted. Her criticism became sharper, more frequent. She'd pick fights over small things, like me leaving a dish in the sink or forgetting to grab the mail, but then turn around and act like I was overreacting for even blinking at her tone. Eventually I started second-guessing myself. Was I the problem? Was I too quiet, too passive, too much of a ghost in my own home? I thought I could love her through it. I didn't know I was slowly being cast as a villain in a story she was already preparing to tell. What I didn't see coming was how intentional it all was. The subtle jabs about my memory, the way she'd twist my words in front of friends, the way she started bringing up my mental health in passing, saying I seemed off or checked out. I didn't realize then that she was laying the groundwork, that she was documenting my quiet moments, my stressed evenings, and weaponizing them into something far more dangerous. I thought we were struggling. She thought she was building a case. When I filed for divorce, I did it because I couldn't live like that anymore. Not for me, and not for our son. But I never expected her to hit back so strategically. In court, she sat there polished and poised, describing me like I was some ticking time bomb. She brought up emails I wrote during burnout, texts I'd sent in frustration, even a message I'd written to my therapist on a particularly rough night. She framed it like I was unstable, even dangerous. The judge looked at me with measured concern, and in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt powerless. But what no one in that courtroom knew, not her, not the judge, not even me, was that our 7-year-old son had something none of them expected. A video he'd recorded by accident while playing with my phone. A video that would in time dismantle everything she tried to build. A video that showed who really raised their voice in our house, who really lost control. I didn't retaliate in that courtroom. I didn't shout or defend myself with desperate words. I sat still, and I let her speak. Because I had started to understand something powerful. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs patience. It wasn't just the courtroom that shook me. It was how natural it felt for Elena to lie about me with that calm voice and those perfect rehearsed pauses. Watching her describe me as some paranoid, withdrawn father who couldn't handle pressure was like watching a stranger use my own face as a mask. I had spent years dismissing her snide remarks as stress or exhaustion, but sitting there, listening to her tell the judge that I had episodes and mental spirals, I realized something that hit deeper than anger ever could. She hadn't changed. She had just finally taken off the mask. After that hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying moments I had ignored when she would purposely provoke me in front of our son, then tell me I was being too sensitive when I asked her to stop. The way she had gradually isolated me from close friends, saying I was too tired to see them. I had called it miscommunication. I had called it marriage. But now I could see it for what it really was. Conditioning. She had been planting the idea of me as the problem long before she ever set foot in court. I remembered one morning when I couldn't find my keys and she just stood there, arms folded, watching me search with a slight smirk. Then she said, "You're losing your mind, Marcus. Seriously." I had laughed it off back then, but now it came back with new weight. She had repeated that phrase so many times, sometimes playfully, sometimes in anger, that I had started to believe it myself. That's the thing about psychological warfare. It doesn't come with bruises, it comes with doubt. And when doubt takes root, it grows fast. I started thinking maybe I had failed. Maybe I hadn't loved her enough, worked hard enough, been present enough. I blamed myself for not seeing the signs. But then I remembered how often I walked on eggshells, how often I stayed silent just to keep the peace. And I began to wonder, when did silence stop being a virtue and become a cage? I also started noticing how our son, Eli, had been watching it all. He was quieter than usual during those months, always fiddling with my phone, recording voice notes for fun. He didn't say much when Elena and I were tense, but I'd catch him looking between us like he was trying to figure out who was telling the truth. That haunted me, not just because of what he saw, but because I realized I'd been teaching him without meaning to, that it's normal to shrink when someone tries to erase you. That realization wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a door softly closing behind you. But it was final. I wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. I was fighting to reclaim my own identity, and I knew I couldn't do it by playing the same game she was playing. I had to do it smarter, slower, silently. The confirmation came on a Thursday afternoon. I had picked Eli up from school, and we were sitting on the couch, eating microwave mac and cheese and watching some cartoon he liked. But I couldn't follow. He was playing with my phone again, flipping through old videos he'd saved. I remember hearing my own voice echo faintly from the speaker, then hers. I turned toward him slowly, confused as he played a clip I had never seen before. What I heard next made my hands go cold. It was Elena. Her voice, sharp and unfiltered, filled the room. "Why don't you grow a spine for once? No wonder your boss treats you like garbage." There was a thump. Probably her throwing something on the table, then a mocking laugh. "You can't even stand up for yourself in your own house." Then silence, broken only by my voice, low and steady. "Can we not do this in front of Eli?" That's when I realized he had recorded it. Not on purpose, but it was real, unedited, undeniable, and more than just proof of emotional abuse. It was a mirror showing me who I had become in that house. Quiet, dismissed, and painfully small. Eli looked up at me like he had done something wrong. I didn't scold him. I didn't even speak. I just placed my hand gently on his shoulder. He went back to his cartoons, and I excused myself to the kitchen, phone still in hand, heart hammering against my ribs. I must have listened to that clip 10 times in a row. Each time I caught something else. The venom in her tone, the calculated timing, the way my voice seemed to disappear beneath hers. I wasn't crazy. I was just conditioned to believe I was. That video wasn't the only one. I found 5 more over the next few days. Little things Eli had captured while pretending to play, while filming his toys, or while Elena ranted in the background. It was like a secret documentary of our life. One I hadn't agreed to, but that now held the truth I couldn't explain with words alone. It was as if Eli knew on some deep, unspoken level that one day I might need proof. That changed everything for me. Not in an explosive way, but in a slow, deliberate shift. My mind cleared. I started writing things down. Dates, incidents, patterns. I reread old texts from her and saw how carefully they were worded. I saw how her concerns were always framed as me being unstable, overworked, or forgetful. She was building a narrative, and I had just uncovered the footnotes. I didn't run to my lawyer or storm back into court. I waited. I watched. I stopped reacting the way she wanted me to. When she tried to provoke me during pickups and drop-offs, I stayed calm. When she made sly remarks about my state of mind, I just nodded and let her talk. That unsettled her more than yelling ever could. She needed me to lose control to validate her script, but I was done playing that role. I had confirmation now, not just in the form of audio files, but in the way she flinched when her manipulation didn't land. I had seen behind the curtain. And once you see the strings being pulled, the puppet show can never hurt you the same way again. There's a certain kind of power that comes from no longer needing to defend yourself. After discovering those recordings, I stopped trying to win her approval or even the judge's immediate validation. I shifted my focus inward to strategy, to stillness, to preparing without announcing. Elena expected me to crumble, to get desperate, to beg for access to my own son, but instead I stopped speaking unless I had something measured to say. I let the silence do what years of arguing never could: reveal who was truly in control. At school events, she'd show up with that same glossy perfection, lipstick unbothered, voice just loud enough for others to hear her comments about me. "Oh, Marcus is here. I guess he remembered this time." Or, "We all know how off he's been since the split." I'd catch the sideways glances from other parents. Before, those looks would have gutted me. Now, I let them pass, because I knew something they didn't. Her performance was exhausting her, and it was only a matter of time before the cracks showed. Behind closed doors, she was growing callous. Maybe she thought I was broken, or maybe she underestimated the strength of someone who has absolutely nothing left to prove. I noticed her emails getting sloppier, her tone growing more demanding and contradictory. She wanted to control the narrative, but she wasn't keeping track of the lies she'd already told. And every time she slipped, I took note. Not with anger, with precision. When we had to exchange EI, she tried baiting me, showing up late, claiming I missed pickups, or inventing last-minute emergencies. But I stayed composed. I documented everything. I installed a dashcam in my car. I began archiving our entire communication thread. I even switched to a parenting app that timestamps every message, every schedule, every cancellation. She resisted at first, saying it was paranoid, but the judge had recommended it, and I didn't argue. I just made it standard. Eli noticed the change too. I became more present, not just physically, but emotionally. I didn't talk about his mom. I didn't poison him with my hurt. Instead, I focused on building a safe, stable rhythm with him. Game nights, homework help, bedtime stories. He started to open up more, quietly, carefully. Children sense when something isn't right, even if they can't explain it. I made sure that with me, he didn't need to explain. He could just be. Elena didn't like that. I could tell. The calmer I became, the more unpredictable she grew. She would send long, spiraling messages at midnight, trying to provoke. Sometimes she'd accuse me of being cold or emotionally checked out. But that's what happens when you stop feeding a false narrative. The person relying on it begins to panic, and panic eventually turns into mistakes. I didn't rush to use the videos. I knew they were powerful, but timing mattered more than impact. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was restraint. I had evidence that could expose her, discredit her, maybe even turn the custody tide in my favor overnight. But instead of striking back, I studied the rhythm of her manipulation. I waited for her to overextend, because when someone builds their power on lies, they always eventually lean on them too hard. My lawyer, Sarah, had been skeptical of my silence at first. "You're calm, Marcus," she said, "but sometimes the court needs noise to hear the truth." I didn't disagree, but I asked her to trust me. I shared the videos with her one by one. She sat in silence as she watched them, her expression tightening as each clip played. When the final one finished, Elena shouting, calling me a spineless freak in front of our son, Sarah looked up at me with a steadiness I hadn't seen before. "We're going to win," she said, "but on your terms." That was all I needed. We built the case piece by piece. Every document, every date, every voicemail, Elena left dripping in contempt, was added to the file. But still, we kept it quiet. We didn't threaten. We didn't warn. The court saw a man who showed up on time, kept his cool, and followed every rule without complaint. Meanwhile, her side began slipping. Late filings, aggressive messages. She was unraveling, and I didn't even need to respond. Then something unexpected happened. Eli asked me, "Dad, are you okay?" It caught me off guard. I said yes, of course, but he looked at me with this old soul seriousness I didn't expect from a 7-year-old. "You don't talk as much anymore," he said, "but you seem stronger." That one line nearly broke me. Because he was right. I wasn't louder. I was clearer, and he had noticed. My son was watching me not just survive, but rebuild myself silently, and that was the justice I hadn't even known I needed. I started journaling at night. Not for court, for me. I wrote down what I wanted to teach Eli someday about emotional discipline, about never reacting out of rage, about protecting your name without destroying someone else. I realized then that revenge wasn't about vengeance, it was about reclaiming truth. And truth doesn't need applause, it only needs to outlast the lie. Everything was ready. We had a court date set. And the night before, I stood in the hallway outside Eli's room, listening to him hum to himself while drawing in a notebook. I didn't know what the judge would decide, but I did know this. I wasn't the man she tried to convince the world I was, and tomorrow, neither would the court. Courtrooms aren't built for emotion, they're built for facts, timelines, and evidence, cold structures that often miss the human stories woven between the pages. But when we walked in that morning, something felt different. Elena wore her usual polished mask, lips tight with the confidence of someone who still believed she had the upper hand. I kept my eyes on the judge. I didn't look at her. Not once. That more than anything seemed to rattle her, because silence in the face of manipulation feels like thunder to someone who feeds off chaos. The hearing began predictably. Her lawyer opened with the same narrative. Marcus is erratic. Marcus is emotionally unstable. Marcus has a history of mental strain. Then came the concerned emails, the highlighted texts taken out of context, her detailed testimony about moments where I'd shut down emotionally. It was a polished, practiced performance. But this time, I had something stronger than words. I had reality, and it was time-stamped.
Sarah stood up calmly. No theatrics, no anger. Just the truth, Your Honor, she said. We'd like to submit video evidence, recorded independently by the minor child, demonstrating a pattern of psychological and verbal mistreatment by the petitioner toward the respondent and in the presence of the child. I glanced at Elena. Her face didn't twitch yet, but as the first video played, that control began to crack.
The courtroom grew still. In the recording, Elena's voice was unmistakable, harsh, mocking, laced with contempt. "You're pathetic, Marcus. You think staying quiet makes you strong. No wonder Eli's scared to talk around you. You don't even matter." My voice followed, steady and low. "Please don't say that in front of him." Then, the sound of a door slamming. Silence. The judge looked down. Elena tried to interject, claiming the video was taken out of context, but no one spoke. The room had heard what it needed to hear. One by one, the clips played, each one chipping away at the narrative she had spent months curating. Her charm didn't hold. Her tone shifted from cool denial to sharp defensiveness. She tried to redirect blame, accusing me of coaching Eli, of manipulating the situation, but the damage was done. She had buried herself with her own voice, and I hadn't raised mine once. When the last video ended, the judge spoke quietly. This evidence significantly changes the court's perspective on the dynamics of this custody arrangement. That was it. No explosion, no applause, just a sentence. But to me it felt like an earthquake, not because I won something, because I had survived something, and the truth had survived with me. I looked at Ei sitting quietly beside my sister in the gallery, holding the same phone that had once just been a toy in his hands. He didn't smile, he just gave me a little nod. Like he knew, like he had always known, and in that moment I didn't feel victorious. I felt something better, realigned. After the hearing, the atmosphere around Elena changed. She didn't speak to me when we passed each other in the hallway. Her face, usually poised and unreadable, had finally cracked under the pressure of her own performance. For the first time since our split, she looked like someone who no longer knew what would happen next, and that terrified her. Because control wasn't just a habit for her, it was her entire identity. Without it, she unraveled. It started small. She missed a scheduled pickup with Eli and claimed she forgot. Then came a late-night message riddled with typos and accusations, clearly written in a moment of emotional volatility. I didn't respond. I just forwarded it to the parenting app. When we had our next court-ordered co-parenting meeting, she barely looked at me. Her tone was clipped, her eyes tired. Whatever mask she used to wear had become too heavy. She wasn't prepared for the one thing she never anticipated: silence that didn't fear her anymore. Meanwhile, things in my life grew quieter, but fuller. Eli began to laugh more, sleep better, and ask questions. Real questions, like what love is supposed to feel like, or how people heal from hurt they can't explain. We'd sit on the porch some nights, just the two of us, watching the sky dim, and I'd listen as he processed the world with the kind of honesty most adults can't manage. I didn't always have the answers, but I had peace, and that was new. Elena's collapse didn't come in a single moment. It came in waves. The court eventually modified the custody arrangement, granting me primary placement. She didn't contest it, not out loud, but you could see it in her posture. The stunned silence of someone who thought they could rewrite reality, only to find it had recorded itself in full. The judge even ordered mandatory counseling for her. Again, she didn't protest. Her voice, the weapon she once wielded so easily, had lost its sharpness. I never gloated, not once. I didn't post on social media. I didn't tell mutual friends I told you so. Revenge wasn't the point. Preservation was. My reputation had survived, because I didn't fight her lies with noise. I fought them with patience and truth, and I let her fall into the trap she set for me. That was the most satisfying part. Not her loss, but my refusal to become what she accused me of. In the months that followed, she stopped trying to provoke me. She grew quiet in the group chats. She no longer sent those late-night essays about what a failure I was. She was still present, still in Eli's life, but she no longer owned the narrative. I had reclaimed it, not by shouting but by waiting, watching, letting the truth rise like it always does, slowly and then all at once. The day the final ruling came in, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still. The court granted me full custody, with structured visitation for Elena and a long list of behavioral requirements she had to meet. It wasn't a punishment, it was a boundary, and for the first time in years, I saw what a life looked like when it wasn't under siege. No more second-guessing, no more recording my thoughts in case they got twisted, just space-wide, clean, and mine again. Eli adjusted faster than I expected. Kids are like that. Resilient if you give them something safe to grow inside. He started sleeping with both eyes closed again. He started sleeping with both eyes closed again. He no longer flinched when the door opened. He laughed louder, drew pictures that didn't always have dark corners. One night he asked me if I was better now, and I told him the truth. I'm not better. I'm free, and freedom feels better than perfect ever did. Elena didn't attend the last hearing. Her attorney said she was unwell and requested to move things forward without her present. I agreed, not out of pity, but because I had no more interest in seeing her try to perform her way out of consequence. Her silence wasn't satisfying, it was just irrelevant. That's when I knew the story had ended, not with fireworks, but with a door closing behind me, softly, for good. I never showed Eli the videos. Maybe one day I will, when he's older and ready to understand the weight of what he unknowingly handed me. But for now, I let him live in the version of reality I fought for, the one where peace is possible and love doesn't raise its voice to be heard. I don't need him to know how bad it was. I just want him to know how strong he helped me become. People sometimes ask how I stayed calm, how I didn't lose it in court or scream back when she lied. And the answer is simple. I knew the truth. And when you know the truth, really know it, deep in your bones, it gives you a kind of patience that looks a lot like power. That's the secret. Revenge isn't fire. It's water. It erodes, slowly, persistently, until the rock that once blocked you crumbles on its own. So now I live quietly. I raise my son. I work. I breathe deeply. And sometimes when it's late and the house is still, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and think about everything I survived. Not with bitterness, but with pride, because she tried to define me as broken, and instead I became unshakable.